Can adults learn a second language, and if so, how easy is it? Well, I grew up only speaking English until my 20s, and then I learned Spanish and some Chinese, so in this video, I'm going to give you my experience learning a second and even a third language. Hey, I'm Nicholas Dembski, the single dad nomad, helping you make money while traveling the world on a budget, and in this video, we're going to talk about learning a second language, how easy it might be, and what it can actually do for you. So first things first, I'm an American, and like most Americans, I grew up only speaking English. Now I know there are a lot of Americans who grew up, say, down in the South. They grew up learning Spanish or some other language as well, or maybe they're from a big city, so it's really easy to take a class where they learn a second language. I'm from a really small town in the middle of Michigan. You know, there was 100 people in my graduating class, so it was a really small school, not a lot on offer, and certainly not in terms of language learning. Granted, we did have some Spanish classes and I went through them, but I would say even after 2 years of studying Spanish in high school, I probably learned more in 2 weeks just walking around Mexico. Now, why is that? First off, I think that if you're going to learn a second language, doing it in your own country with people who aren't fluent in that language, even if you have one teacher who's fluent, it's just not going to be enough. You have to learn in the situation itself, I believe. Now granted, you could just watch a bunch of movies in Spanish and be practicing constantly, and you could get good at Spanish like that. Possibly. I don't know. That's not how I did it. Like I said, I spent 2 years studying in an academic setting, and I felt like I learned more in just 2 weeks walking around Mexico. And that's because you actually get to hear it full time, and you're actually working out the muscles in your throat and in your face to make the sounds that you need to make. So for example, if I'm going to learn to say something very simple in Spanish while I'm in America, I might learn how to say I have a cat. And I might learn to say it like this: Yo tengo un gato. And that's because I learn it from other people who are also learning Spanish. Or it might be from like a teacher who had traveled to Cuba, say during their college years, came back and got a teaching certificate in Spanish, and now it's an English speaker teaching me Spanish. So I learn Yo tengo un gato. But that's not how you're going to pronounce it when you're actually speaking with other people. You're going to say Yo tengo un gato or something like that. My accent isn't perfect, but the more you spend time in other places, the better your accent is going to get. Here's just an example. I used to never be able to roll my R's, so saying the word dog in Spanish would be perro. It would be the same as saying the word butt. Perro, perro. They're one spelled with one R, one spelled with two R's. Now, after spending that time in Spanish-speaking countries, hearing it so often, and then being able to practice it and reproduce it, I can easily say perro, and I can roll that R forever. And it wasn't something I could do before I learned it by actually living in that environment, exposing myself to it constantly, and then practicing reproducing that sound. And outside of that, you really have to start using it all the time if you really want to even get good at it. It's like, take for example that you want to build up some really strong arms. Are you going to go and just pick up an acorn one time and throw it on the ground and call it good? No, that is not weightlifting. You need to go pick up heavy weights up and down multiple times, day in, day out, for months, if not years, to get incredibly strong, right? Well, you have to do the same thing with language as well. You are literally working new muscles throughout your throat and face, and you are also training your ears to hear new things as well. You literally, as a solo English speaker, cannot hear some of the sounds that other languages are producing. You just don't hear them. Your ears tune them out. You have to be able to put yourself in an environment and hear it over and over again until your ear can actually pick up, oh, that's the sound I'm hearing. This is how I can kind of reproduce it. And the perfect example, obviously, is that rolling R. How many Americans do you know cannot roll an R at all? And that's because they haven't heard it enough and they haven't been able to reproduce it through their own vocal systems. Después de unos años, yo pienso que mi español está bien, no es perfecto, pero yo puedo comunicarme en una forma una poco profunda. And that wasn't always possible until actually I started learning my third language. Now, my third language I am absolutely terrible at. It is Cantonese. It's a dialect of Chinese that's spoken in places like Canton and Hong Kong of China. It's a tonal language. It has 9 different tones. I can barely even hear the difference in them, let alone reproduce them, even though I've spent a couple years in that environment. However, there are some people who can understand my Cantonese. Mostly it's people that I spend a lot of time with in Hong Kong when I'm there. You know, my daughter's Chinese family, they can understand my Cantonese probably better than anyone just because they're used to hearing it themselves. Interestingly, after I spent some time in Hong Kong and actually trying to learn the language, because certainly in Hong Kong you don't need Cantonese, you don't need any form of Chinese, you could get totally by on just English. There's lots of 7-Elevens and McDonald's and everything, and all those people speak English that work in those, the locals do. But I've found, interestingly, that after I started learning Cantonese and, you know, getting okay at it, I moved to Barcelona after that, and I realized that my Spanish got a lot better, even though I hadn't practiced it in possibly 2 years. So what happened there? I did a little bit of research on this, and it turns out that the development of a third language improves the development of a second language. So once you have that first language and you start learning that second language, it's a little bit difficult to pick it up and really get it down full time. But once you start getting that third language, there's something about the way your brain starts operating that it really starts manipulating words in a much better way. So for whatever reason, after I had spent about 1.5 years learning Cantonese in Hong Kong, I went right to Barcelona and found that I could not only hear Spanish much better, but also my pronunciation of Spanish was much better as well. Now, it didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time until I started researching why it was that was happening. But now that I've had that experience, I can tell you that probably the best way that I would recommend that adults can learn a second language is by going and living it, studying it, and practicing it every day. Okay, you want to be a bodybuilder, then you got to live, study, and practice bodybuilding. You want to fluently speak another language, you have to do the exact same thing. I've got some other videos right here you might be interested in. Before you go, I want to give you some free money. Click the link down in the description box to get the Acorns investing app. It's going to give you $5 for free just to get started.